Hey guys, tonight we step carefully into a silent place where daylight rarely dares linger, and shadows come alive as the sun dips below the jagged hills. Imagine yourself standing at the entrance to a forgotten town on the edge of nowhere. Wooden buildings leaning crookedly, the streets thickly dusted with sand that whispers under your boots. You glance up as the last orange sliver of sunlight vanishes, feeling an odd chill settle into your bones. Tonight's journey might just show you why some mysteries from history prefer to remain unsolved. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. I'd love to know where you started watching tonight. Maybe curled up in your cosy room, or perhaps sitting outside beneath a gently rustling tree. Leave a little compliment or comment. I appreciate them all. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You stand alone at the outskirts of a ghost town, darkness drifting in like a slow, velvet tide. The silence is more than quiet. It's a pressure that pushes softly against your ears, broken only by your own breathing. You hesitate at the edge, boots planted firmly, as though you instinctively sense that stepping forward will cross some invisible boundary. But curiosity beckons you forward, gently yet persistently, tugging you deeper into this place forgotten by time. The wooden sign above you once proudly declared a name, but years of sand and wind have erased its identity, leaving nothing but splintered wood and mystery. It sways slightly, creaking in the evening breeze, as if whispering warnings you can't quite decipher. Behind it, buildings rise, tilted frames of weathered pine and cracked shutters that flap softly, like ghostly hands urging you onward. As your eyes adjust to the growing gloom, you see structures emerge from the darkness. A general store, shelves still filled with dusty cans and bottles, stands next to a blacksmith's forge, empty but somehow not abandoned. There's a hotel with a roof caved in, windows yawning open as though the town itself is gasping for air. You squint into the twilight, half expecting to see movement inside. But all remains motionless, an eerie stillness that sends a slight shiver down your spine. You take slow, measured steps into the street, boots sinking into sand softer than moonlight. It muffles each footfall, as though the town wants your arrival kept a secret. Glancing down, you notice strange tracks alongside your own, footprints worn faint by wind and time. You wonder how many have stood here before, seeking treasure or escape, only to vanish as quietly as they arrived. Historians still argue whether ghost towns disappeared slowly over decades or were abandoned abruptly, emptied overnight by panic, drought, or gold fever dreams. In the distance, a tumbleweed rolls lazily, catching your eye as it dances past abandoned hitching posts and rusted wagon wheels. Fringe legends whisper that tumbleweeds and ghost towns aren't driven by wind at all, but moved by restless spirits, endlessly wandering streets they can never leave. You smile nervously, brushing the thought away, but the wind picks up slightly, sending another weed skittering by just a bit too purposefully. Suddenly, you realize night has fully taken hold. The sky deepens into velvet black, speckled with stars shimmering uncertainly, as if unsure whether their glow should penetrate this place. No moon tonight, just inky darkness settling around you like a heavy cloak. You feel the town pressing in, as if breathing slowly, patiently, waiting for you to decide whether you belong here or will flee like the rest. A sudden creak makes your heart quicken. A door, somewhere close, shifting slightly on rusted hinges. You peer into the darkness, eyes searching buildings for signs of life or something more ghostly. You remind yourself with a weak chuckle that old wood often shifts and groans as night cools, settling into the comforting logic of science rather than letting superstition creep in. Yet somewhere deep inside, you aren't fully convinced. Your gaze drifts toward the nearest building, a saloon whose swinging doors hang unevenly. Beyond them, shadows dance strangely, beckoning you to explore further, promising stories of revelry and ruin. You hesitate again, torn between curiosity and caution, and wonder how many others stood exactly where you now stand, drawn inexorably inward, step by cautious step, until escape became impossible. As you stare into the saloon's dark interior, something stirs. Perhaps a flicker of shadow or merely imagination playing tricks. You inhale slowly, steadying yourself. No turning back now, you think, swallowing uncertainty with determination. After all, ghost towns hold history in their silence, tales left half told, waiting for someone brave enough to piece them together. The sand whispers gently beneath your boots as you move forward, heartbeat matching each careful step. A breeze rustles through deserted streets, carrying murmured secrets from buildings long abandoned. And as you cross that threshold into darkness, you sense this night will challenge more than just your courage. It might reveal why no one ever truly survives a night alone in a ghost town of the Wild West. Your boots creak on wooden floorboards, announcing your cautious entry into the darkened saloon. Immediately, the air around you thickens with the scent of stale whiskey, aged leather, and long-forgotten cigar smoke. In the dim light seeping through gaps in shuttered windows, the saloon's interior appears untouched, as if its patrons vanished mid-drink, leaving everything eerily intact. Chairs are scattered as though hurriedly abandoned. Glasses sit half-filled on weathered tables, coated with layers of dust thick enough to hide fingerprints of the departed. As you step further inside, each footfall stirs fine particles into lazy spirals, illuminated briefly by thin moonbeams. At first glance, the place seems frozen in time, yet the quiet creaks of wood shifting beneath your weight suggest hidden movement. Maybe the building itself is uneasy with your presence. You half expect the barkeep to materialise behind the bar, polishing a glass and offering a wry smile, though you quickly remind yourself ghosts don't generally tip well. Your eyes trace the carved wooden bar, a masterpiece of frontier craftsmanship, now scarred with marks left by spurs and knife tips. Behind it, rows of liquor bottles line shelves, labels faded and peeling, the once bright colours bleached to dull sepia tones. You wonder briefly if the whiskey inside has aged gracefully or turned as bitter as the memories it holds. Fringe legends tell of old bottles in ghost towns mysteriously refilling overnight, spirits drawn from thin air, though historians still argue whether this was merely a clever marketing ploy by saloon keepers or evidence of restless ghosts unwilling to relinquish their pleasures. Slowly, you approach a nearby poker table, cards scattered as though an argument had erupted mid-game. A pair of dusty aces stares up at you defiantly, suggesting someone was about to win big, only for luck to suddenly, inexplicably vanish. You run a finger over the brittle cards, feeling the rough edges fray slightly beneath your touch. You joke softly to yourself, whispering, "Seems like the dealer had one job and still lost." But your smile fades quickly, replaced by a chill of unease. Moving cautiously toward the piano in the corner, you gently press a single ivory key. It responds with a faint, mournful note, barely audible yet echoing unnaturally in the empty room. You withdraw your hand, suddenly self-conscious, as though you've disturbed something best left alone. Legend claims ghost town pianos play themselves, keys pressed by unseen fingers reliving joyous melodies or sorrowful tunes that once filled these silent spaces. Historians still argue whether such claims arose from genuine supernatural experiences or the overactive imaginations of isolated travellers seeking company in empty halls. Your gaze drifts upward, following the ornate staircase leading to rooms that once hosted weary travellers and wealthy gamblers alike. The upstairs railings lean precariously, wooden spindles cracked and missing, as though battered by forces beyond simple neglect. A velvet curtain, moth-eaten and dusty, flutters faintly, caught by a stray draught from the rooms above. You feel your pulse quicken, imagination conjuring faint whispers of laughter or argument drifting down, barely audible yet impossible to ignore. Turning your attention to the mirrored wall behind the bar, you glimpse your reflection distorted through layers of dust and grime, an uncanny vision almost unrecognizable. Historians still argue whether frontier mirrors held symbolic significance, capturing more than reflections, perhaps fragments of souls who stared too deeply or too long into their own secrets. You chuckle softly, shaking off the thought, yet your reflection seems reluctant to smile back, lingering a fraction longer than you find comfortable. Suddenly, a soft clink echoes through the room, a sound distinct from your careful movements. Your breath catches, eyes darting around nervously, seeking its source. You discover a glass previously resting on the bar, now sitting precariously at the edge, rocking gently as if placed there deliberately by unseen hands. You approach slowly, heart beating faster, aware the room feels colder now, the air heavier, as though the saloon itself is holding its breath, awaiting your reaction. You pick up the glass, turning it slowly in your hand. Its surface bears no fingerprints, no warmth of human touch, yet it feels strangely charged, imbued with energy from hands long vanished. Setting it gently back down, you step away carefully, wondering if this subtle message warns you to retreat or welcomes you deeper into the mysteries awaiting in other buildings, down this darkened street. As you edge toward the swinging doors to leave, a faint shuffling drifts from upstairs, a sound both enticing and deeply unsettling. You pause, weighing curiosity against instinctive caution, knowing this town doesn't surrender its secrets easily. Maybe the abandoned hotel holds answers, or perhaps it simply conceals deeper mysteries that refuse to be disturbed. Either way, you sense your night is far from over. Leaving behind the saloon's lingering whispers and phantom movements, you brace yourself for whatever else awaits, knowing that in a Wild West ghost town, each building has secrets, and every shadow holds stories best left untold. You push open the heavy door leading to the hotel's main staircase, its hinges groaning as if protesting your intrusion. The air here feels older, thicker, clinging to your skin with the musty scent of worn carpet and faded wallpaper. Moonlight streams through shattered windows at the top of the stairs, casting long, skeletal shadows that dance across the walls. Each step you take echoes in the hollow silence, carrying your heartbeat upward toward the creaking corridor above. As you ascend, the wooden stairs ripple beneath your weight, reminding you that centuries of countless footsteps have worn them thin. You pause halfway, listening for any sound beyond your own intake of breath. But all you hear is the soft lament of wind slipping through cracks in the roof. You glance down at the entrance you just left, seeing only an empty doorway surrounded by darkness, as though the saloon behind you never existed at all. Reaching the top, you find yourself in a narrow hallway lined with doors, each marked with a tarnished brass number that has faded into indecipherable scratches. The wallpaper peels in wide strips, revealing warped lath beneath, as though the building itself is shedding its skin. A single bulb, long since burned out, hangs from a frayed wire overhead. You imagine it briefly igniting with ghostly illumination, only to wink out and leave you in near darkness once more. Do you remember the flicker of candlelight in section 1? That comforting glow feels a world away as you step carefully between doorways. One door stands slightly ajar, its frame splintered as if forced open long ago. You push it inward with a gentle nudge, revealing what appears to be room 7. The carpet lies in dusty folds, and a threadbare rug sprawls across the warped floorboards. A 4-poster bed sits in the centre, its canopy torn away, leaving only the skeletal wooden post that once upheld lavish drapes. On the bedside table, a cracked porcelain lamp leans sideways, its shade missing. You examine the lamp's base and notice initials scratched into the ceramic. J. M. You wonder about the traveller who once stayed here, what story their name whispered in these walls, and whether their presence lingers in the room still. Fringe rumours insist that restless spirits mark the rooms they died in, etching their names into furniture so visitors can witness their final imprints, though historians still argue whether such anecdotes arose from genuine hauntings or clever tales spun to sell ghost tours. Stepping out of room 7, you continue down the corridor toward room 12, where the door hangs wide open. Inside, you find overturned luggage cases, their contents scattered, a tarnished pocket watch, a pair of silk gloves, a broken comb threaded with hair, and a torn photograph whose subject smiles sadly up at you. The photograph's sepia tint lends an otherworldly warmth to the cold room. You lift it carefully, tracing the outlines of 2 figures, perhaps newlyweds or siblings, forever frozen in happier times. You wonder why no one reclaimed these belongings, and why the room remained untouched by scavengers. Historians still debate whether ghost towns were looted clean in a matter of weeks, or if some properties remained mysteriously preserved. A sudden soft thud distracts you, something shifting behind you. You whirl around, heart pounding, but see only the open doorway where moonlight pools. A breeze from somewhere unseen sends a curtain of cobwebs fluttering against your cheek. You brush them away and exhale, reminding yourself that abandoned buildings often settle, causing loose objects to fall. Further down, you approach room 15, its door sealed shut by a heavy wooden beam nailed across it. The wood is blackened at one edge, and you sense a faint, lingering scent of smoke. You crouch to examine the beam, noting scorch marks marring the surface. Had someone tried to keep something in, or keep something out? A quirky local legend claims that a family barricaded themselves inside as a sandstorm hit, only to vanish without sending for help. Scholars still argue whether this tale reflects a true tragedy buried beneath shifting dunes, or a moralistic fable warning of isolation's dangers. You try to peer under the beam, but the angle is too steep. You consider prying it loose, but a sudden creak from the ceiling above stops you. The floorboards shiver as if something heavy behind them is shifting. You step back, heart hammering, recalling Section 2's whisper of unseen movement. This building feels less like an inanimate husk and more like a creature, alive in its decay, watching your every move, summoning courage. You step away and continue to the stairwell at the corridor's end, where the balustrade hangs broken, revealing the 2 stories below. Leaning over, you notice footprints pressed into the dusty floor, leading to the railing's edge, large and low, as if someone much taller and heavier than you once stood here. They continue off the landing, heading toward a side stair that leads to the roof. You swallow and steady yourself, the idea of climbing through broken rafters to the roof, where the night breeze howls, seems equally thrilling and terrifying. Above you, a light tap-tap-tap begins, steady and deliberate like fingernails tracing the wood. You stiffen, breathing shallow, every nerve alive with alertness. The sound travels along the hallway, punctuated by a faint scraping behind closed doors. You fight the urge to flee, reminded that you came here seeking answers, not comfort. Your curiosity tightens around you like a noose, urging you onward, demanding to know what awaits behind each door, in every shadow. You remember the swing of those saloon doors below, inviting and ominous all at once. Wherever you're headed next, you understand that this hotel holds the most intimate secrets of the town, stories of travellers who never left, whose laughter turned to whispers and whose footprints remain etched forever in dust. As the tap-tap-tap continues, you steel yourself for each step, determined not to let spectral rumours chase you away. With a final breath, you turn toward the roof stair, hand pressed against the wall to steady yourself. The echo of the tapping grows louder, as though encouraging you to ascend, to peer beyond the shattered skylights and into the night sky, where stars seem to shift uneasily. You place one foot on the stair's first rung, feeling each board creak in response, and begin your slow, careful climb, ready or not for whatever awaits among the rafters above. You emerge from the hotel's yawning doorway onto Main Street, now bathed in a ghostly silver glow. The moon, full and unnaturally bright, hovers just above the fractured horizon, casting long, distorted shadows of shuttered windows and sagging porches. Each building's silhouette seems to lean toward you, as though curious or hungry for your presence. The air is unnervingly still, every breath you take sounding louder than the last. You trudge forward, your footsteps crunching in the sand like dry bones clattering in a crypt. To your left, the once proud general store stands open-mouthed, its front doors torn from their hinges. Stacks of empty crates lie scattered, their weathered wood splintered and warped. You imagine settlers once stocking canned peaches, coffee, and nails here, essentials for daily life now reduced to silent relics. Mainstream accounts note that by 1890, frontier general stores often carried hundreds of items vital to a town's survival. Yet here, every shelf is barren, as though looted by time itself. Historians still argue whether these ghost towns emptied through gradual economic decline or abrupt mass exodus in the face of ecological disaster. You pass a broken hitching post, its crossbeam lying half buried in sand. Ghostly hoofprints circle the post, crisp, untouched by wind or decay, then vanish at the wheels of a rusted wagon, abandoned mid-turn. Fringe legends insist these prints appear each full moon, as spectral horses return to rest between phantom cattle drives. Skeptics counter that hoofprints in firm sand can last years in arid climates, feeding tall tales rather than spirits. Yet as you stare at these frozen tracks, cold fingers of doubt curl around your heart. Your shadow stretches unnaturally long, flickering when you stumble over a loose board in the wooden plank sidewalk. You steady yourself against the railing of an empty porch, its posts carved with names you can no longer decipher. Wind whistles softly through chinks in the boards, producing a keening whistle that drifts down the street like a mournful dirge. You remind yourself that wood shrinks and shifts in the desert's temperature swings. But the sound feels too musical, almost a coded message meant only for the night. Ahead looms the boarded-up post office, its windows barred with iron grates. You press your ear against the cold wood and hear scratching like fingernails raking from the inside. Your pulse flutters. You think of rats, but the rhythm feels too deliberate, too patient. A quirky tale from local lore describes a postmistress who locked herself in here after being accused of hoarding town supplies. Her anguished scratching could still be heard months later, before the town fell silent. Historians still debate whether the scratching ever happened or evolved from echoes of windblown debris. You continue, passing a deserted livery stable where rusty horseshoes dangle from nails in the storefront siding like forgotten trophies. You count 4 shoes, the perfect number for a healthy horse, but no beast is tethered here now. The stable doors are ajar, revealing empty stalls whose walls bear long claw-like gouges in the wood. Some whisper that a panicked stallion once charged through the alley, fracturing every board in its path, then vanished into the night, leaving only its hoof marks behind. Skeptics dismiss the story as hyperbole born of cattlemen's tall tales, yet every gouge bears a jagged authenticity you can't ignore. As you round the corner, you spot the blackened remains of the livery's manager's office, its door charred and twisted. You recall the saloon's smoky brew, but here, wood is charred, not wood smoke stained. A mainstream mining report from 1882 cites accidental fires as a leading cause of frontier town destruction, often sparked by kerosene lamps or careless stove use. Historians still argue whether many ghost towns burned accidentally, or if some fires were deliberate, set to erase debts, evidence, or painful memories. You approach the smouldering ruins, eyes narrowing at a faint wisp of smoke that curls upward from ashes. The ground is littered with melted metal fragments and warped nails. As you kneel to examine a glowing ember still alive with heat, your fingers tingle despite the cool night air. You retract your hand, heart pounding. Charcoal can hold heat for hours in these dry conditions, yet something about this ember feels sentient, as though it chose to remain embers rather than fade into ash. Further down Main Street, you notice a pair of curtains flapping inside the abandoned theatre's lobby, illuminated by moonlight. You step closer, peering through shattered glass, and see a torn poster proclaiming last winter's grand performance. Sarsaparilla Slim and the Dusty Dolls. The poster's colours have faded to ghostly pastels, yet the title teases of laughter and foot-stomping songs once heard here. Fringe historians like to claim that spectral performers still tap dance behind closed doors, their shoes rattling nails in hollow floorboards. Mainstream archivists counter that wind blowing through roof vents often rattles old scenery flats, creating illusions of movement. Drawn by the thought of music, you press your palm against the window's ragged edge and step onto warped floorboards. They creak beneath your weight, and for a heartbeat, you imagine hearing the distant tinkle of piano keys, a faint melody drifting from an unseen piano bench. You close your eyes, letting the memory of Section 2's saloon piano echo in your mind. A shiver runs along your spine as the melody, happy and upbeat, morphs into a slow, dirge-like refrain that tugs at your heart. You open your eyes to find the lobby empty, save for dust-choked air dancing in the moonbeams. The curtains no longer flutter. Instead, they hang limp, lifeless. You step back out onto the sidewalk, feeling a fresh breeze, unnaturally cold, brush across your neck. The wind carries a faint murmur, like hushed conversations from rooms long gone. You turn in circles, trying to pinpoint the source, but it drifts away, leaving only silence once more. As you trudge onward, you glance back down Main Street. The moonlight reveals a distant figure standing on a porch, the silhouette of someone watching you. You blink, and it's gone, swallowed by the shifting shadows. You swallow hard, reminded that at this hour, ghost towns blur the line between reality and imagination. Each structure looms with purpose, each whispering breeze carries a story, and every empty street invites you deeper into its mysteries. You steady your breath and press forward, determined to unravel whatever secrets linger in this moonlit thoroughfare. Yet, as you move on, you carry with you the feeling that Main Street itself is alive, an entity of wood, sand, and memory, patiently waiting for you to discover why no soul ever truly leaves a ghost town behind. You round a dusty corner and find yourself standing before the town's old jailhouse, its stout stone walls rising sternly against the night sky. The heavy iron bars on the narrow windows gleam dully in the moonlight, each thick rod a silent reminder of desperate souls once confined within. A wooden sign creaks overhead. County Jail and Sheriff's Office. The paint long since flaked away by sun and sand. You pause, boots crunching on gravel, summoning the courage to step across the threshold where the living once locked in the lawless. Pushing open the heavy oak door, you feel the temperature drop sharply, cooler than the desert night beyond. Inside, the air is stale, reeking of damp stone and human dread. The cell block stretches before you, 3 cells on each side of a narrow corridor, each door secured by massive padlocks that seem too heavy for rusted remains of keys. You shine your flashlight through the bars of cell 2 and glimpse a crudely carved message on the stone wall. No one leaves. Beneath it, a tally of tall, deep scratches, 15 marks, perhaps counting days or victims. Historians still argue whether frontier jails were emptied when towns died, or if some prisoners simply disappeared within their confines, their fates swallowed by neglect. You step into the corridor, the echoes of your footsteps bouncing off stone like distant gunshots. One cell door hangs open, its lock shattered, hinges rusted through. Inside, an overturned bench and a coil of rope lie abandoned. as if someone attempted a makeshift escape, or perhaps a sinister trap. A quirky local legend tells of a man named Buck Slip Small, who supposedly broke free only to vanish into the night before authorities realised the cell was empty at dawn. Some swear they still hear his mocking laughter drifting through the barred hall, though skeptics insist it's merely the wind whistling through cracks. You shine the light across the corridor to cell 5, labelled Murderer's Row. Its door remains padlocked, but you see deep gouges around the lock plate, as though someone tried to pry it open with metal spikes. Inside, the floor is littered with a fine layer of dust, except for a single patch where the grain has been swept clean, an invisible stage for an unseen performance. You recall a mainstream fact. By 1880, nearly 75% of frontier jails lacked proper sanitation, turning cells into breeding grounds for disease and despair. Historians still argue whether poor conditions led to violent uprisings within these walls, or if most inmates crumbled quietly under isolation. A sudden skittering sound draws your attention to the far end of the hall. A single rat darting along the base of the wall seems innocuous, yet its frantic movement feels almost purposeful, as though it's urging you to follow. You resist the urge to laugh. Of course, my tour guide is a rat. You joke softly, but an uneasy flutter tickles your stomach. You track the creature's path to a small hatch in the floor, its hinges corroded but intact. Could these shadows conceal a subterranean passage? Some prisoner's secret escape tunnel? Fringe stories claim the jail was built atop an old mine shaft, used by lawmen to dump bodies or as a clandestine getaway. Scholars still debate whether any tunnels truly existed, or if the tales were invented to scare drunks at midnight. You step closer to the hatch, shining your light into the black opening. The smell is pungent. Earth, rot, and something faintly metallic. You shimmy down, heart pounding, and lift the hatch with a groan of protest. Inside, you find a narrow stone stairway spiralling downward into utter darkness. You swallow, remembering that once you descend, the path back up might not feel so inviting. Before you decide, you pause at the cell block's end and examine an old bullet hole in the thick wall, a crude remnant of a jailbreak attempt. Beneath it, someone scrawled, "They came for me at midnight." You shiver, brushing a sleeve across the inscription and feeling the rough stone beneath your fingertips. Could that midnight knock still echo through empty cells? You crack a wry smile. "Guess I should have brought a pillow. I hear ghosts get cranky when you barge in without warning." Turning back to the hatch, you note a small brass plate screwed beside it, engraved simply with E.O. 1882. Was this the initials of an officer, or perhaps the name of a condemned man? You jot the letters in your mind, the turn of your tongue tasting like ancient rust. You wonder, did he slip the dusty rat a crust of bread to guide curious visitors? Or was this some inadvertent breadcrumb trail meant to entrap the unwary? You steel yourself and slide the hatch closed, deciding to investigate the surface cells first. As you stand, a faint clang echoes behind you, metal meeting metal, the sound of a lock sliding shut on its own. You whirl around, flashlight beam darting across the corridor, but find every cell door still open. You press your ear to cell 1, where the sheriff once kept rowdy drunks overnight. Through the bars, you think you hear subdued humming, as if someone is softly chanting an old lullaby. You back away slowly, reminding yourself that echo patterns in stone corridors can warp sound, yet that melody feels too deliberate, too mournful to be mere acoustics. You cross to cell 3 and notice a broken key lying in the dust, a heavy iron contraption no one would carry out of prison. You pick it up carefully and feel its cold weight in your palm, as though it's waiting to be used again. A joke pops to your lips. Well, at least I won't get locked in. Yet beneath your humour, you know this key might unlock more than a door. It could open a chapter of tragedy written in these walls. You pocket the key and head back toward the corridor entrance. each step stirring fresh dust. The air feels suddenly oppressive, as if the cells themselves are exhaling decades of fear and regret. You pause at the threshold, shining your light down the hallway one last time. In the gloom, you swear a figure stands half visible, leaning against the wall. A man in a sheriff's uniform, hat pulled low. You blink, and he's gone, leaving only an empty corridor and echoing silence. Outside, the moon's glow reassures you that the open desert awaits, but something about the jailhouse feels permanent. A dark heart at the centre of this ghost town. You step back into the night, the heavy door swinging shut behind you with a final, resonant click. As you distance yourself, you glance over your shoulder. The barred windows seem to watch you go, as though waiting for your return. You tootle a nervous laugh, whispering, "Hope they accept visitors." Then, boots crunching on gravel, you move on, knowing that the jail never truly empties, and that some prisoners, whether living or dead, remain confined within these haunted walls. You find the entrance to the collapsed mine shaft just beyond the saloon ruins, its once solid timbers sagging inward as if crushed by the weight of secrets. Every step toward the mouth crunches on loose rock, and the air grows cooler, tinged with damp earth and stale dust. You shine your flashlight into the yawning darkness and catch a glint of rusted rails, remnants of a miner's ore cart long since derailed. Leaning forward, you nearly stumble over broken timbers and fallen beams, evidence that gamblers and lawmen aren't the only ones who met misfortune here. In the late 1870s, boomtown mining accidents claimed more lives than gunfights, with one study estimating that shaft collapses caused nearly 30% of fatal injuries in Western territories. Historians still argue whether hasty construction to chase gold veins sacrifice safety, or if geological instability made disasters inevitable. You shine your light down the tunnel, the beams slicing through the thick shadows, as you recall tales of miners who dug too greedily, piercing hidden water tables and flooding entire shafts in minutes. You edge inside, flashlight flickering as the earth's hush swallows each beam of light. The rails curve away, leading deeper into the bowels of the mountain. A discarded miner's helmet lies nearby, its leather strap frayed, glass lenses long shattered. You pick it up, noting dried mud caked on its brim. Fringe law insists these helmets sometimes carry the last gasps of their wearers' breaths, an ominous echo that can trigger coughing fits in intruders. You stow the helmet, laughing nervously at yourself. Nothing like wearing someone else's bad memories. Yet the chuckle echoes oddly, as though the shaft itself is listening. Pressing on, you navigate a low, jagged tunnel where timbers wedged against the walls groan with each passing gust of air. You step over a pool of still water reflecting your flashlight's beam. Its glassy surface seems too perfect, almost mirror-like. In frontier mining camps, so-called flammable springs sometimes trapped methane, requiring lanterns to be doused at tunnel mouths. Historians still debate whether miners' deaths by gas were underreported or exaggerated to dramatise the trade's dangers. A sharp crack cuts through the silence, a beam splitting under unseen pressure. You freeze, chest tightening, and whirl around, half expecting a collapse. Instead, the tunnel's walls shift faintly, as though inhaling and exhaling this ancient graveyard. You press onward, heart drumming, reminding yourself of the saloon piano's note. Old places settle, wood shifts, nature reclaims. Further in, you discover a makeshift shrine tucked into a recess, a pair of rusted pickaxes crossed, a candle stub melted into the stone floor, and a weathered photograph of 3 miners smiling beneath dust-spattered lamp helmets. The image is so vivid it seems to glow. You whisper a soft prayer, honouring their lives. A quirky tale claims miners sometimes left small shrines to ward off shaft spirits, yet mainstream mining logs rarely mention rituals, suggesting these practices were whispered among small crews only. You skid around a collapsed section where earth and rock have tumbled from above, sealing off the main passage. The pile is deep and recent, slightly looser than the surrounding dirt, hinting at movement within the past few months. You prod it with your boot. Small rocks trickle down with sharp taps. You swallow and shine your light into the fresh debris, seeing nothing but void. Historians still argue whether sealed shafts hide undiscovered ore or entomb lost miners forever. Turning away, you follow a narrower side tunnel marked by charcoal-painted signs, safety slope, and air shaft. The words, scrawled decades ago, somehow seem to beckon. You choose the air shaft route, hoping for a quicker exit to fresh air. The passage narrows until you must crouch, scraping knees against damp stone. Your flashlight beam catches names carved into the walls, initials and dates stretching back to 1874, carved by anxious hands marking each day above ground. You pause at T. J. 6 days underground. A tremor surges through you. 6 days trapped. 6 days of darkness and hunger. You shiver, blinking away a sudden wave of empathy. The crawl leads to a vertical ladder of iron rungs embedded into slick stone. You test each rung before shifting weight, noting the rust that threatens their hold. A misplaced slip could send you tumbling back into blackness. Fringe accounts hold that some miners hung themselves from these ladders in despair. Their bodies a warning to trespassers. Scholars still debate whether these suicides were common or merely sensationalized by outsiders unfamiliar with miners' camaraderie. You climb, one careful rung at a time, until you reach a narrow opening where fresh night air gushes cold and sweet. You haul yourself through and emerge onto a rocky ledge overlooking the valley. The full moon's light washes over the desolate landscape, turning rock faces silver. Below, the ghost town's lights are all but extinguished, save for your single beam. Leaning against the shaft's stone collar, you shelter from swirling dust and catch your breath. Behind you, the tunnel yawns like a gaping mouth, a portal to an underground world ruled by risk and reward. You secure your flashlight and shine it back inside, half expecting movement, but see only darkness. As you descend the ladder to stand on solid ground, you realise the mine was never just about gold or silver. It was about hope and despair entangled in Earth's bones. The miners who dug here risked collapse, methane pockets, even madness in pursuit of fortune. And in the end, the mountain claimed more than ore. It claimed their stories, leaving behind only echoes in empty shafts. You brush dust from your knees and pocket the little shrine's candle stub as a talisman. The wind whistles down the shaft behind you, carrying a faint lament, a choir of distant voices singing the miners' unsung dirge. You let the sound wash over you, a haunting lullaby that reminds you how close death and discovery often dwell side by side. Turning away from the mine, you glance back at the shaft mouth, its dark outline a rouge-stained grin against the stars. You swallow the knot in your throat and step forward, boots crunching on gravel once more, determined to uncover what other stories lie buried in this forsaken place. You step away from the mine's yawning mouth, letting the reverberations of distant laments fade into your chest. Crossing the street, you find the blacksmith's forge, its chimney collapsed, and iron tools strewn like discarded bones. The anvil sits abandoned on a bed of hardened slag, cooled long ago but somehow still radiating the memory of fire. As you approach, the scent of soot and hot metal lingers faintly in the desert breeze, and you realise this place once rang with thunderous hammer strikes that forged horseshoes and dreams alike. Rays of moonlight slice through the broken roof, illuminating the battered bellows stacked in a corner. You run a hand over their cracked leather, imagining the rhythmic whoosh that once fed the forge's flame. In booming towns, blacksmiths were as vital as doctors, shaping tools and horseshoes essential for frontier life. By 1885, nearly 90% of Western settlements advertised a resident smith within their first year. Historians still argue whether forges served more as economic lifeblood, or as community gathering spots where gossip and goods were exchanged under sparks. You circle the anvil, noticing deep grooves carved into its surface, testaments of countless metal shapes moulded, beaten, and tempered by skilled hands. A quirky rumour claims that if you press your palm to the anvil at midnight, you can feel echoes of the last hammer blow, a remnant shockwave left by the smith's final strike before the town died. You press your hand against cold iron and swear you feel a faint pulse, like a heartbeat slowed to dream tempo. You smile softly, chalking it up to imagination, though goosebumps ripple down your arms. At the back wall hangs a rack of rusted tongs, hammers and chisels. You pick up a hammer by its worn wooden handle, feeling the weight of generations in its heft. You tap it gently against the anvil's edge, and it emits a high, crystalline note that rings too clearly in this emptiness. In folklore, smiths' hammers were said to ward off evil spirits, metal's purity scaring ghosts back to their graves. Mainstream metallurgy texts of the era, however, focus on carbon content and tempering techniques, dismissing supernatural properties as myth. Historians still debate whether such protective beliefs arose from blacksmith guild traditions brought by European immigrants or emerged organically on dusty plains. Moving beside the cold hearth, you peer into the forge's heart, a carved-out space of brick and iron pocked with ash. A single charred log rests inside, as though someone paused mid-stoke and never returned. Slate shingles above have crumbled, letting moonbeams paint the ash bed in silver. You slide your hand above the log, expecting warmth, but feel only crisp cold. Yet in the stillness, you hear something faint, a soft hiss, like steam rising from hot metal plunged into water. You lean closer, heart fluttering, and until the sound resolves into the sigh of wind through broken bricks. You blink, chastising yourself for letting silence play tricks. A battered horseshoe lies nearby, its nails still embedded as if last nailed onto a fleeing steed. You recognise the style, a fullering shoe used to grip rocky terrain, popular among stagecoach horses after 1872. Fringe tales say these abandoned shoes sometimes clack against the floor on their own, reenacting a phantom horse's passage through town. You stand perfectly still, and for a breathless moment, you swear you hear two metal taps against wood, then nothing. You force inhale and remind yourself hoof echoes on boardwalks can travel far in cool air. Your flashlight beam catches a small engraving on the forge's edge. J. 1881. You crouch to read it, thinking perhaps the smith's initials. Who was J? Did he wander off to join the gold rush? Or did he perish in one of the mine collapses? A local diary once mentioned a John Rail Roberts, blacksmith by trade and amateur prospector by obsession, who disappeared after swearing he'd strike it rich in the mountain east of town. Historians still argue whether Roberts' fate inspired ghost stories, or if his disappearance remains an unsolved mystery buried by time. You rise and inspect a dipping vat lined with rust. It once quenched glowing metal, sealing its hardness in water's embrace. A thin film of stagnant water still covers the bottom, reflecting moonlight in murky swirls. You drop a pebble into it. The splash echoes like a distant drum. Fringe artisans claimed that quenching water taken from certain wells imbued steel with qualities of that water's origin. Mine water for toughness, creek water for flexibility. Modern material science, however, points to temperature differentials and carbon content as the sole determinants of temper. Behind you, the battered forge door rattles softly, and you whirl around, beams slicing through darkness. The open street beyond seems unchanged, but a sudden breeze rattles a loose shutter, sending shards of moonlight flickering across the forge's floor. You shiver, remembering Section 2's dusty glass rocking, Section 4's phantom figures. It feels like each building shares a secret, waiting for you to coax it out. Leaving the anvil's realm, you pocket the rusty horseshoe as a talisman, both relic and riddle. You pause at the forge's broken entrance and inhale the cool night air, tasting soot and sage. The world beyond promises more mysteries, graves stripped of names, wells whispering secrets, churches darkened by doubt. Yet somehow, this forge feels the heart of the town's industry and its death knell, where the final spark died and iron dreams cooled for the last time. You step onto the wooden sidewalk, the echo of your boots mingling with the night wind. The forge's silhouette recedes behind you, its iron skeleton once alive with fire now collapsed under silence. But even in its ruin, you sense that this was where blood, sweat, and hope fused, the forge where life hammered out destiny. You turn your gaze toward the cemetery beyond town, where graves wait like silent judges, and continue down the street, letting the anvil's memory reverberate softly behind each step. You step off the boardwalk onto soft earth and find yourself at the edge of the town's small cemetery. In the pale moonlight, row upon row of headstones stand silent sentinels, their inscriptions worn smooth by wind and rain. You pick your way between graves where few names remain legible, most stones blank or etched with simple crosses. The unmarked stones form a ghostly choir, their anonymity more haunting than any epitaph. You realise these are the graves of those whose stories were deemed inconvenient, shameful, or simply forgotten. Mainstream burial records from the 1880s indicate that nearly 20% of frontier deaths went unrecorded, their headstones left blank due to lack of funds, time, or concern for the deceased's reputation. Historians still argue whether these anonymous burials represent society's disregard for the marginalised, orphans, drifters, criminals, or simply reflect the brutal haste of frontier life, where survival trumped ceremony. You kneel before one particularly weathered marker, its top chipped away and sides pitted. Beneath the western moon, you swear you glimpse faint lettering. Mary. Or perhaps May. You trace your fingertip across the granite's grain, feeling decades of rain-washed tears. Fringe lore claims that pressing your palm on such stones at midnight summons the ghost whose name was erased, granting a whispered confession of their final thoughts. You smile, half charmed, half dreading to hear a story you cannot unhear. Ahead, a cluster of child-sized graves catches your eye, tiny markers surrounded by iron railings, each bearing shallow footprints in the surrounding dirt. You recall that infant mortality rates on the frontier soared above 300 deaths per 1,000 births, a grim reality few plaques acknowledged. Yet these markers lie unadorned, silent witnesses to lives ended before they began. Historians still debate whether these unmarked graves reflect community grief too painful for public display, or a cultural acceptance of children's deaths as tragically commonplace. A sudden breeze stirs the juniper overhanging the cemetery's edge, scattering brittle leaves across your boots. You glance at one stone etched in faint cursive, J. S. 1882. You lean closer, straining to read any more, but the rest has crumbled away. You wonder who J. was, a stranger blown through town in pursuit of fortune, or a local whose name meant everything to someone once. You press your ear to the stone, half expecting a breathy echo, but only silence greets you. Walking deeper in, you notice one stone still bears a clear epitaph. Thomas McCall, beloved blacksmith, gone too soon. His grave alone holds a name and date, a brief commemoration in an otherwise nameless field. You pause, thinking back to Section 7's forge, and realise this was his anvil you touched, his labour turned to rust. Fringe storytellers say that blacksmiths often received proper burials because their tools symbolised civic foundation. Without them, towns collapsed even faster. Mainstream anthropologists argue that blacksmiths' social status earned them marked graves, unlike transient labourers whose contributions vanished with the mines. You step away from McCall's stone, boots crunching on gravel, and approach a low hill at the cemetery's centre, where 4 unmarked mounds cluster in a tight circle. These are the Outcasts 4, names erased due to scandal, a gambler executed for murder, a minister defrocked for theft, a madman locked away, and a woman accused of witchcraft. Most graves here bore makeshift wooden crosses that decayed long ago. You bend to inspect one mound, noticing a scrap of cloth trapped in roots, perhaps a fragment of burial shroud. You capture it carefully, noting its rough weave. Historians still argue whether such isolated burials served punitive ends to silence scandals or offered secret refuge, allowing communities to bury those they loved but could not publicly commemorate. Fringe historians claim secret societies maintained these graves, painting symbols in moonlight to honour the ostracised. You shiver, sensing the weight of hidden compassion in these soil-mounded graves. A distant coyote wails, cutting through the silence, and you startle, heart racing. You glance up at the headstones looming like ghostly witnesses. The cemetery feels both oppressive and tender, an archive of sorrows and lost identities. You take one last look at the circle of mounds before turning back toward the empty town, carrying with you the quiet grief of unspoken names. As you step onto the street, you whisper their initials, J, M, T, J. J. A small act of remembrance. In a place where anonymity reigns, even a murmur of a name reverberates like a promise. You continue onward, boot-stirring, dusk-worn dust, aware that some stories are etched not in stone but in memory, carried by each visitor brave enough to speak the forgotten names aloud. You wander beyond the cemetery to the town square's centre, where a hand-dug well yawns in a circle of cracked flagstones. A battered wooden bucket lies prostrate on its side, its rope frayed and knotted where desperate hands once clung. Leaning over, you peer into the dark shaft, its walls slick with moss and time. Moonlight glints faintly off stagnant water hundreds of feet below, promising both life and ruin in its ink-black depths. Frontier wells like this were critical lifelines. By 1882, nearly 80% of Western settlements relied on hand-dug wells for water, despite the contamination risks from surface runoff and nearby privies. Historians still argue whether towns collapsed primarily from waterborne diseases like cholera and typhoid, or from more sensational causes such as drought-driven exodus. You inhale the musty scent rising from the well, tasting hints of algae and decay on the cool night air. Leaning closer, you drop a pebble and count the seconds until it strikes water. 1, 2, 3, too quick for such a depth, indicating the shaft may connect to an underground stream. You hesitate, recalling tales that ghost towns will sometimes conceal more than water, artifacts, bones, even entire bodies. Fringe legends insist that townsfolk tossed guilty secrets into the well, stolen gold, incriminating letters, or the remains of unclaimed victims, all slipping into darkness to vanish forever. You drop the rope's end into the shaft, feeling its weight unwind as it slides over the rim. Thoughtfully, you tie a scrap of cloth to the end as a makeshift marker, then tug gently to test the rope's reach. It descends smoothly until you feel it jerk against something solid, an uneven ledge or perhaps an old bucket caught on a jutting stone. You try to lift it, but the cloth rips, and the rope thuds back against the well's wall, vanishing into the gloom below. You settle for puzzlement rather than clear answers, pulling the rope back up to inspect the torn end. Rising, you circle the well's edge and note curious carvings on the flagstones, letters and symbols half eroded, but still legible in parts. S. 79, no return, and an arcane spiral pattern. Whoever carved these left a warning or remembrance. Perhaps the initials belonged to someone who lost their life seeking water. A quirky account in a traveller's diary from 1879 mentions a prospector named Samuel Spiral Sims, who mapped underground tunnels beneath such wells. convinced they led to hidden vein pockets. Mainstream geological surveys of the era dismissed his theories as folly, but historians still debate whether Sim's maps, lost when he disappeared, ever guided prospectors to new strikes. Your flashlight beam catches a faint glimmer inside the well mouth, something metallic, reflective. You balance on one foot and lean over, pressing the light against the damp stones. There, snagged on a jagged edge, lies a small rusted tin can lid. You fish it out, wiping away muck to reveal embossed letters A.B. 1880. Whoever A.B. was, they dropped this lid here a century ago, and it remained undisturbed until now. You press the lid into your hand, feeling its cold roughness, and contemplate peering deeper. But as you lean forward, a low, gurgling sound rises from below, water churned by something moving just out of sight. You jerk backward, stumbling over the bucket. Heart thundering, you remind yourself that subterranean currents and fallen debris can stir water, even without living creatures. A sudden breeze rustles the buildings around you, and you spot drive ruts leading away from the well, wide, shallow tracks pressed into the earth, as though heavy wagons once circled here. But when you inspect them, you see they vanish abruptly at the square's boundary. Fringe historians claim these are bog tracks, where wagons sank into quicksand-like mud surrounding the well and were abandoned rather than freed. Mainstream agricultural assessments of the time warned settlers to line well perimeters with stones to prevent collapses. Few towns heeded the advice, and some wells swallowed cattle whole. You step back from the well and wipe sweat from your brow, though the night air is cool. Your mind drifts to Section 5's jailhouse, Section 6's mine shaft, and you sense connections weaving through town. What was dumped down the well? What was sealed in cells? What was buried underground? Each acted as a receptacle for human secrets and misdeeds, hiding evidence from prying eyes, but time's slow hand reveals all. A twig snaps behind you, and you whirl around, beam slicing through darkness, but only the silence of empty streets greets you. The well seems to pulse with unseen energy, a silent witness to centuries of loss and concealment. You slip the tin lid into your pocket, a small token from the depths, and circle the well's edge once more before heading back toward the livery stable, its dark form looming like a skeletal steed. As you walk away, the well's gurgle fades behind you, replaced by the soft hiss of wind through cracked wood. You glance back over your shoulder at the rim, dark, deep, and unwavering. You shiver, wondering what secrets linger in its watery abyss, echoes of thirsty souls who drank, weighed misdeeds, or surrendered their guilt to this silent, ever-hungry maw. You step forward, boots crunching the gravel, ready to explore the next chapter of this haunted town. You approach the chapel at the end of a narrow lane, its steeple tilted like a mournful head bowed in grief. The heavy wooden doors stand slightly ajar, revealing rows of dusty pews and a pulpit draped in moth-eaten velvet. The stained glass windows, once aglow with warm colours, now gape open, their shards scattered across the floor like fallen tears. As you step inside, a hush envelops you. This place feels consecrated by sorrow rather than salvation. The altar holds an open Bible, its pages yellowed and edges curled. A single verse remains underlined. The night cometh, wherein no man can work. You trace the words with your fingertip and feel a chill crawl up your spine. Mainstream church records from 1883 show that frontier congregations faced dwindling numbers as towns dried up. By 1890, nearly 40% of rural chapels in the West were abandoned. Historians still argue whether spiritual decline caused town collapse or simply followed economic abandonment. You move toward the choir loft, its railings carved with musical notes nearly faded into anonymity. A cracked hymn book lies open on a pew. Pages flip to Abide With Me. You cough softly, the echo rolling down the aisle like a reluctant prayer. Fringe accounts suggest the chapel bell tolls at midnight, though no bell remains, its sound carried on ghostly winds to summon lost souls. Skeptics argue the noise is merely wind passing through these steeples gaps, but you swear you hear a faint chime echo in the rafters. Glancing up, you see beams of moonlight slant through broken windows, spotlighting dust motes dancing like tiny angels fallen from grace. You take a hesitant step closer to the altar rail, stepping on creaking floorboards that groan beneath you, as though complaining about your intrusion. You recall Section 9's well-reflecting darkness. Here, the chapel reflects loss, faith abandoned, hope eroded by time. Behind you, something brushes, soft as a sigh, against the back pew. You spin around, heart pounding, but find only silence and empty seats. A loose hymn pamphlet drifts from the organ loft above and flutters down, landing at your feet. You pick it up. Faded ink reads, "Service for the departed." Inside, names of deceased congregants are listed, most scratched out by wet fingers. You note one name remains intact, Eliza Grant, 1881. You wonder if she led this congregation in its final days and whether she rests among the unlabelled graves beyond town's edge. A light breeze whispers through the broken doors, carrying the faint scent of incense and candle smoke. You follow it to the sacristy, where rows of melted candle stubs still cling to a stone ledge. One stub remains remarkably intact, a pillar of wax standing guard over memory. You pick it up, feeling its smooth warmth from body heat. Fringe law says that carrying such a candle stub protects travellers from evil spirits encountered in abandoned sanctuaries. Mainstream liturgical studies of the era focus on candlelight's symbolic purity, dismissing protective charms as folk religion. Historians still debate the interplay of official doctrine and frontier superstition. You return to the nave and climb the steps to the choir loft, slipping into a pew and surveying the empty congregation below. The floorboards beneath creak in greeting, and you imagine echoes of voices raised in hymn, once resilient notes defying hardship, now swallowed by memory. You hush yourself, inhaling the dusty air, and whisper, "Abide with me," as though invoking a past congregation to linger again for just one final song. Descending the loft stairs, you feel the chapel pulse with latent energy, a solemn place where faith lingered even as the world turned away. You slip the hymn pamphlet into your pocket, knowing its torn pages carry both comfort and unease, a relic of devotion hanging on the brink of oblivion. Stepping back into the moonlit lane, you pause to glance up at the steeple. Its slant seems less accidental and more deliberate, like a shepherd bowing under uncounted sorrows. You inhale the night's fragrance, sage, dust, and silence, and press onward toward the schoolhouse, your mind heavy with echoes of sermons never delivered and prayers never answered. You walk away from the chapel's solemn quiet, boots crunching on cracked stone, carrying the weight of Section 10's lesson. Even faith left behind leaves a resonant void in the heart of a dying town. And as you move on, you sense the next building waits to reveal why no heart truly finds rest here after night falls. You crest a sandy hill and spot the one-room schoolhouse standing apart from the main cluster of buildings, its bell tower perched precariously atop a sagging roof. The wooden siding is sun-bleached to bone white, and the single window panes gape empty like blank stares. You push open the noisy door, and the sound echoes with a hollow clang, as though the school itself remarks at your intrusion. Stepping inside, the air carries chalk dust, old wood, and a whisper of lost lessons. Rows of battered desks face a blackboard still inscribed with faded chalk. Lesson 1, a stitch in time saves 9. Below it, someone has scrawled, 9 leaves lost. You trace the letters with the tip of your finger, feeling the rough chalk indentations. In the 1870s, Western schoolhouses often served multi-age classes with a single teacher. Attendance could be spotty due to harvests or illnesses. Historians still argue whether frontier education was a beacon of hope for settlers or merely a brief institutional pause between more urgent labours. A lone slate lies discarded on a desk, etched with little stick figures holding hands around a sun. You lift it gingerly. Children's laughter seems to echo faintly in your mind. Fringe legends claim that the phantom school bell, long since removed, still rings at midnight, summoning ghostly pupils to sit once more. Skeptics point out that wind whistling up the chimney can mimic a bell's tone, but you swear you hear a soft ding as the door swings closed behind you. You move toward the teacher's podium at the front, stepping carefully over scattered papers and broken pencils. On the podium rests an open reader book, its spine cracked, pages yellowed. You flip to a marked story, The Lost Wagon Train, the final chapter underlined. You read the lines. They vanished into the night, leaving only the echo of horses' hooves. A chill traces your spine as you close the book, sensing the town itself may have taken that fateful journey. Glancing upward, you find the rope hanging where the bell should be, frayed strands dangling above you. You tug gently, and the rope swings in a slow arc, slicing dim light into the dusty air. You let go, but it doesn't still. It keeps swinging, creaking back and forth. You step aside, calling Section 2's saloon doors and Section 10's pulpit whispers. Here, the swing seems personal, as though offering you a lesson in motion. You can almost imagine the bell's absent ring, a lonely summons never answered. At the back, you notice a small cloakroom cupboard with hooks. Tiny jackets and hats hang in faded arrays, their colours drained by years of sun. One hat, too small even for the smallest desk, sports a ribbon reading Class of '84. You lift it, feeling brittle straw crack beneath your fingers. Fringe tales say that if you place such an orphaned hat on your own head, you momentarily see through a child's eyes, vivid flashes of games, lessons, and long-lost friends. You resist the urge to try, though a flicker of curiosity dances in your chest. You step outside onto the porch, sunlight replaced by moonlight and wind that tugs at your hair like a playful student grabbing attention. The door behind whispers closed, though no breeze nudges it. You look back. Empty classroom, silent chalkboards, and a stillness that feels louder than any bell. You whisper, "Class dismissed," and head down the steps, boots stirring the fine dust. Beyond the school, the playground lies overrun with tumbleweeds and broken swings. You test one chain. It rattles like a slow heartbeat. A swing seat drifts forward, then back, as though offering passage to children unseen. You shrug and move on, the world's hush broken only by your own breathing and the soft creak of metal rejoinders. As you weave back toward the town's edge, you sense the schoolhouse's lessons linger, abandoned knowledge, echoes of innocence lost, and the question of who would learn from a town left to ghosts. And somewhere, faint as a memory, you think you hear that phantom bell's distant ring, one last call to those who never truly left their desks behind. You slip back into the saloon through its warped doors, the hinges protesting with a long, low moan. The air inside is thick with the memory of smoke and spilled whiskey, every surface coated in a thin film of dust that swirls as you move. Your steps echo against the warped floorboards, drawing you deeper into the scene of the final standoff frozen in time. Chairs lie overturned, their splintered legs pointing skyward. Playing cards are strewn across a round table, as though tossed aside in a moment of terror. In one corner, the battered piano's keys remain half raised, forever stuck on a melancholy chord. You breathe slowly, tasting the lingering sting of gunpowder in the stale air. At the bar, the mirror behind the bottles is shattered into a spiderweb of cracks. Moonlight bleeds through the cracks, fracturing into shards of silver that dance on dusty glass. You crouch, examining the largest fragment framed by charred wood. Here, a clean bullet hole gouges through the mirror's backing, edges curled inward. Frontier saloon walls witnessed countless gunfights, By 1881, nearly 40% of violent injuries in towns like this involve 6 shooters. Marks of honour and terror in equal measure. Historians still argue whether these shootouts were driven by personal codes of honour or by the reckless bravado fuelled by cheap liquor and idle hands. You shine your flashlight across the bar's polished surface, where lie a single brass casing and a shattered shot glass. You pick up the casing, .45 Colt stamped clearly on its rim, and roll it between your fingertips. A quirky rumour holds that if you catch a bullet casing fired in a famous duel, it will whisper the rival's final curse when held under your ear at midnight. Skeptics counter that the whispering is your own breath echoing in a hollow shell. But here in the saloon's hush, even your pulse seems loud enough to carry hidden voices. Your light drifts to a round poker table in the centre of the room. 4 chairs set as if awaiting players. On its dusty surface, 2 cards remain face up, the Ace of Spades and the Queen of Hearts. Tales say the final players were locked in a deadly draw, bullets flying mid-deal, determining fate rather than poker chips. You lift the cards gently, noting their edges frayed and stained. An old gambler's memoir claimed his hand rose from the dead to collect on a lost game, quoting "Cards deal the living, ghosts settle the score." Historians still debate whether such accounts are genuine eyewitness tales or sensationalist fiction spun to sell dime novels. The saloon's bar rail bears deep gouges where spurs scraped wood during frantic fisticuffs. You kneel and run a finger along one such mark, feeling the coarse grain give beneath slight pressure. Above it, someone etched initials into the wood. W.C. 1882. You wonder who W.C. was. Perhaps Wild Carter, a notorious gunslinger said to have ridden through town, leaving scars on both men and furniture. Fringe biographies claim Carter's reputation grew from a single exaggerated encounter, while mainstream historians insist court records never mention him. The wood around the carving feels impossibly smooth, as if polished by decades of fingers tracing a legend. You move toward the piano, heart thudding as the bare keys gleam like bones. You press middle C with a tentative fingertip. It emits a hollow, muted thud, as though the instrument itself mourns. In another whisper of superstition, it's said that ghost town pianos play themselves on moonless nights, keys depressed by unseen patrons reliving one last dance. Scholars still argue whether these sounds derive from shifting floorboards or the wind's subtle breath through broken window panes. A sudden clink draws your attention back to the bar, where a solitary shot glass now sits upright, perched on the edge as though placed by an invisible hand. You approach, noting tiny flecks of something darker adhered to its rim, gunpowder granules, perhaps, or flecks of old blood turned to rust. You lift the glass, its surface so cold it almost frosts under your palm. Frontier gunsmiths warned that mismatched powder charges could scatter lead at odd angles, causing unpredictable wounds. Mainstream medical records from the era noted that many gunshot injuries were exacerbated by shrapnel lodged in clothing and bar fixtures. You set the glass back, careful not to jostle its precarious balance, and notice something new. A lone cowboy boot beside the piano bench. It's scuffed and sun-bleached, but straps and buckle remain intact. From its worn toe protrudes a folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle. You pick it up with gloved fingers and unfold it gingerly. Inside, you see hastily scrawled words. Last round at midnight. Don't miss your shot. Your breath catches. Midnight has come and gone. If this note was heeded, the writer remains here among the ghostly stillness. Was this a warning, a taunt, or a final boast? Fringe collectors prize such artifacts as keys to unlocking the exact moment of carnage. Yet mainstream archivists caution that paper rarely survives decades in desert heat without unravelling completely. A shimmering movement in the mirror's shards catches your eye, a flicker of a silhouette flitting behind the shattered glass. You whirl, heart racing. but see only empty chairs and fallen bottles. For a heartbeat, you think you hear the soft click of a hammer being cocked. Then silence so profound it hums in your ears. You steady your breath, blinking tears of dust, and remind yourself this old building creaks and sighs like any other, especially at night. Slowly, you circle back to the bar and climb onto a stool, as though assuming a position at a familiar haunt. You rest both hands on the scarred wood and close your eyes, letting the room's residual energy wash over you. You hear 3 distinct pulses, your heart, the wind rattling loose shutters, and faint but undeniable, a slow, rhythmic tapping, like a boot heel dancing on the dance hall floor. The cadence is steady, persistent, as though an unseen cowboy is marking time before his next shot. You open your eyes to find the saloon empty once more. Moonlight shifts, shadows realign, and the tapping fades. You stand, footsteps deliberate, and slip off the stool, backlit by fractured glass. Your reflection fractures again. Multiplicities of you arrayed across the shards. Each image seems to beckon, one urging retreat, another urging you to linger, to understand the final tableau. You reach the doorway and pause, hand on the warped frame. Behind you, the saloon's hush swells, heavy with unspoken farewells and unfinished duels. You step out into the night, the cool air greeting you like a release. Before you leave, you glance back. The saloon stands motionless, yet its emptied roar echoes in the wind, promising that this shootout, like every other, will never truly end, and those bullets, ghostly or real, will continue to whisper in the dark. You wander away from the saloon's lingering echoes and find yourself at the town's far edge, where the landscape dissolves into rolling sagebrush and scrub. Here stands a solitary signpost, but instead of town names, its weathered boards are blank, as though someone scraped off every destination. You rub your palm against the rough wood and notice faint gouges beneath your fingertips, like someone once carved directions only to erase them. It's as if this place never wanted to be found. In the 1880s, frontier cartographers struggled to map rapidly springing mining camps. Estimates suggest less than 60% of boomtowns appeared on official CES Geological Survey maps. Historians still argue whether these omissions reflect bureaucratic backlog or deliberate attempts by townsfolk to conceal locations from claim jumpers and tax collectors. Here, the absence of any map pin suggests a willful vanishing act. You step off the beaten path onto ground strewn with fragments of leather and iron, a traveller's debris, perhaps dropped by people who came searching and never returned. The air smells of sage and dust, each inhalation tasting faintly metallic, as though the town's very earth carries residues of buried treasures. You scan the horizon. No chimney stacks, no distant whitewashed facades, only the ghost town's core buildings behind you, an open wilderness beyond. To your right, a tumble-down cabin bears no name or number, its door ajar. Inside, you find scrapings on the wall where someone inscribed crude symbols, a circle crossed by 2 diagonal lines, and beneath it, the letters XK. You squat to examine. The markings are too deep to be wind-driven. They feel intentional. Friend treasure hunters insist such cryptic signs marked hidden caches, veins of silver or secret water sources, left by prospectors fearful of thieves. Skeptics counter that these symbols are lodge marks or shepherd graffiti, their meaning lost to time. Scholars still debate whether such frontier symbols formed an underground cartographic code or simply served as personal expressions of uncertainty. You emerge into the pale moonlight and notice the town's original survey stakes, rusted iron rods driven into the soil, yet no clarity remains, only a grid of phantom boundaries. The rotting posts are connected by lengths of frayed rope, forming squares that might once have demarcated lots. You kneel to touch one stake, feeling its cold metal and imagining surveyors trudging across this land, compass in hand, hacking notches into posts to record distances. Without maps, these physical markers were all the settlers had to claim ownership. Mainstream land office records required witness testimonials and visible markers for claims, but when towns dissolved overnight, those records vanished too. Historians still argue whether such ephemeral surveys led to modern boundary disputes or simply underscore the ephemeral nature of frontier claims. As you continue, a gentle breeze carries an almost musical susurration, wind whispering through the rope lines, creating a makeshift harp. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the notes drift through you like a lullaby for lost places. A quirky rumour in cowboy ballads tells of an itinerant fiddler who aligned his tunes with such rope harps, using them to guide travellers back to camp in foggy nights. Mainstream musicologists, however, attribute the sounds to specific wind speeds resonating with rope thickness, nature's own wind harp. Scholars still debate whether those fiddlers genuinely listened to wind music or simply added romantic flair to their tales. Further on, you spot a shallow ditch running beside an old corral. It's too straight to be natural, its edges lined with worn stones that once held water. You crouch to peer inside. The trench is bone dry but wide enough to have channeled a small creek. Without maps indicating water sources, settlers dug such channels to bring water from distant springs. Frontier diaries note that these ghost canals often failed once spring flows dried, leaving empty troughs. Historians still argue whether such primitive irrigation efforts prolonged town life or hastened its demise when water ceased. You stand and brush loose soil from your boots, marvelling at how this town erased itself from memory. No signpost, no map, no recorded location beyond vague references in logbooks. Even the local postal route once listed a delivery to Town No. 5, a plain code that travellers abandon in favour of calling it Nowhere Station. Fringe philatelists prize surviving envelopes stamped Nowhere Station, yet mainstream postal historians dismiss them as anomalies caused by clerical errors rather than a permanent designation. Scholars still debate whether such labels reflect bureaucratic apathy or community defiance. As you round a corner marked only by a single hitching post, you stumble upon an old stagecoach wheel partially buried in sand. Its spokes are intact, and the iron rim gleams faintly in moonlight. You press a finger into the sand-packed hub, feeling its cold curvature. You imagine stage drivers steering via these wheels along routes so poorly documented that only local law guided them. In that era, fewer than one traveller in 10 carried up-to-date route books. Most relied on word-of-mouth directions. Historians still argue whether oral wayfinding preserved connections across the frontier or propagated confusion that doomed isolated settlements. Ahead, you see the remnant of the town well shack, its roof collapsed, but a section of oiled planks remains, stained dark where a map once hung. You step inside and trace your fingers along nail holes in the wood. It's clear someone pinned dozens of papers here. Maps, notices, even wanted posters. Now, only rusted nails protrude. You imagine search parties rifling through their papers, tearing them down to see if any clue remained to guide them to safety, or to the town's buried riches. Fringe historians claim the wreckage still hides fragments of leather-bound maps in torn corners, overlooked by scavengers. Skeptics warn that any surviving fragments would have disintegrated decades ago. Scholars still debate whether definitive evidence of these lost maps will ever surface or if they remain among the unspoken legends buried in desert ruins. You step out of the shack into open desert, feeling exposed without signposts or maps to guide you. Behind you, the silent buildings stand like ghostly witnesses to their own erasure. You realise this town refused to be pinned, charted, or commodified on any map, its location shifting with rumour and dust. In that refusal lies its true haunting, a place that exists only in memory, in the mind's eye of anyone brave enough to seek it. You draw in a slow breath of desert air, seasoned by sage and sagebrush. You pocket the fragment of the mapeless nail, an empty nail yet full of mystery, and turn away. As you walk back toward the heart of the town, you carry with you the stark truth of Section 13. Here, in the absence of maps. The town's story unfolds only in the footprints travellers leave behind, and in the blank spaces history itself hesitates to fill. You return to Main Street and pause outside a cabin whose front porch steps show fresh scuff marks, deep impressions in the wood inconsistent with decades of neglect. You crouch to inspect. These aren't windblown scrapes but boot prints, soles patterned with modern treads rather than old frontier designs. The wood fibres beneath each print appear crisp, torn rather than softened by centuries of wear, as though someone crossed this threshold only hours ago. A thrill of apprehension ripples through you. This ghost town isn't as abandoned as you believed. In 2024, ghost towns sometimes draw tourists and urban explorers, but sanctioned visits require permits and guides. Off-the-map excursions are rare and risky. Historians still argue whether such modern footprints contribute to preservation by raising awareness or hasten decay through unsupervised trespassing. You stand, boots still, listening for any sign of recent inhabitants, but only the wind answers, though it sounds keener, alert to your presence. The cabin's door stands slightly ajar, revealing a dim interior lit by distant moonlight. Inside, you see a metal lantern perched on a splintered table, its borosilicate glass intact and wick unburnt. Portable lanterns in the 1880s used whale oil or kerosene. A modern lantern implies recent occupation. You nudge the door wider, cautious, and the lantern's base shifts minutely on the table, as though someone stepped away but planned to return. A quiver of dread prickles your neck. On a wooden crate beside the lantern rests a small camp stove, its paint chipped, fuel canister empty, and a single aluminum water bottle. These items post-date the frontier era by a century. Fringe researchers report that urban explorers sometimes camp overnight in ghost towns, leaving behind traces before moving on. Skeptics argue that these artifacts are merely scavenged, relocated by collectors. Historians still debate whether modern intrusions can lead to new layers of historical accumulation or simply muddle the past's authenticity. You step inside, boots creaking on the rough plank floor. A faded poster taped to the wall reads, "Doe Peak Hike In," its edges curling. Recent rather than antique. Someone scribbled a note on it. "Camp here. Best views." You trace the handwriting, block letters in black marker. No error-appropriate quill in sight. You swallow, acknowledging that someone walked these dusty streets within your lifetime, seeking solitude or sensation. Turning, you notice footprints pressed into the dusty floor, fresh tread imprints circling the room. The soles match the modern tread on your boots, suggesting whoever passed this way wore similar footwear. You lift a foot to compare and find the prints are slightly larger, deeper, indicating heavier steps than your own. You shiver, imagining a stranger's silhouette moving in these dim corners just before you arrived. Your flashlight scans the walls, revealing a series of modern graffiti tags hidden beneath layers of frontier-era advertising. Love Ghost appears below an old Wild West Wanted poster, the red spray paint vivid against the weathered wood. Beside it, Echo and a stylized skull wearing a top hat. These are far removed from historic day labour scribbles, their bright colour and spray patterns unmistakably recent. Fringe historians lament such defacements as vandalism, while some urban art scholars argue they represent a new kind of transient cultural expression. Scholars still debate whether tagging in ruins demeans history or creates a living layer of contemporary folklore. As you step toward the back of the cabin, you find a makeshift bed of sleeping bags laid atop a threadbare mattress. The sleeping bags bear synthetic fabrics and bright colours lost to frontier chemistries. You run your hand over the smooth surface and note a faint smell of deodorant and sunscreen, luxuries unknown to 19th century settlers. You realise someone slept here after dark, living on the town's secrets while the century turned. A gentle rattle comes from outside, a movement in the shadows beyond the window slit. You freeze, heart clenching. The sleeping bag rustles as if someone stirs beneath it, though the shape inside remains hidden. You shine your light, and the rustle stops. No figure moves in the darkness, only the wind murmuring through gaps in the siding. You back toward the door, eyes sweeping the cabin for more clues. On a nail near the stove hangs a modern day pack, its straps adjusted and buckled. You inhale sharply. This pack must hold supplies. Perhaps a flashlight, maps, food. Whoever owns it might still be nearby, waiting in the shadows or watching your every move. You feel exposed, an intruder in someone else's camp. Pressing yourself against the cool wall, you slip outside, keeping low. The moonlight glints off the aluminum water bottle resting on the crate. You pause, torn between grabbing it as a keepsake and respecting the camper's privacy. You decide to leave it, tucking your light under your cloak as you step off the porch, wanting no part of trespassing further. Behind you, the cabin door creaks shut, so the place itself draws a breath and settles back into silence. You retreat to the street, heart roaring in your ears, and look back, but see nothing but empty windows and lifeless wood. The footprints in the dust remain, but no sign of a living soul. You take a slow step forward, boots stirring dust, mind racing with the realization that someone else walks this ghost town by night. Perhaps they seek thrill, solitude, or a bridge between past and present. Either way, you're not alone. This town never truly empties, and new stories, like unwanted echoes, continue to layer over the old ones. You turn away, letting the cabin's silhouette recede into moonlit gloom, and steel yourself for the next location, a clock tower rumoured to tick backward and eyes that watch from darkened windows. But in your mind, you know the most unsettling discovery of this night, that even in a place meant to be abandoned, life still pulses in fresh footprints and modern artefacts, refusing to remain a silent chapter of history. You round the corner to a squat stone tower standing alone where the saloon once cast its neon glow. Its circular clock face looms overhead, the hands creeping backward in a steady, deliberate cadence. You step beneath it, eyes lifting as the minute hand unwinds time itself, moving counterclockwise against the moon's arc. The ticking, low and mechanical, echoes like a heartbeat in reverse, each tick pulling at your sense of reality. Frontier towns in the late 1800s often featured clock towers as symbols of progress. By 1890, over half of Western County seats boasted a public clock to regulate railroad schedules and civic life. Historians still argue whether these clocks truly marked the frontier's embrace of modernity, or merely masked deeper instability beneath their chiming facades. Here, in this ghost town, the clock's backward spin feels like a defiant refusal to align with history. You step closer, catching sight of Roman numerals inverted, I where the 2 should be, weight tumbling towards 7. The clock's metal hands, once replicas of ornate filigree, are dulled and pitted, yet carry an uncanny precision as they circle in reverse. A quirky urban legend says that if a clock ticks backward, it resets regret, drawing lost souls back to repeat their final hours. Skeptics counter that faulty gear trains or human tampering explain such phenomena, yet here, the movement feels too purposeful for mere malfunction. Beneath the tower, you spot a plaque weathered nearly smooth, its inscription faded. You trace the faint lettering with a fingertip and discern a date. Dedicated July 4th, 1884. Independence Day, the very symbol of forward progress, carved into a monument reclaiming time for ghosts. Fringe chronologists suggest the plaque's sponsor had a vendetta against linear time, hiring a clockmaker to reverse its movement as a gesture of cosmic irony. Scholars still debate whether such esoteric commissions ever occurred or survive only in broadsheet whispers. You circle the tower, watching each tick align with a distant church bell whose chime arrives seconds before the clock's backward minute hand completes its revolution. The world feels untethered. Windows you passed only moments ago now appear on the opposite side of Main Street, the fallen wicket gate of the corral looming ahead, though you know it lies behind you. Recalling Section 13's mapeless signpost, You realise the town's layout itself warps around this clock, as though the tower serves as a nexus where geography bends. You lean in to inspect the clock's face through a broken window. Inside, cogs and pulleys stand exposed. Some teeth on the gears are worn smooth, while others bite with unnatural sharpness. You identify a ratchet wheel forcing the hands backward, its pole reversed in an intricate dance. Mainstream horology texts attribute such mechanisms to novelty clocks of the early 20th century, not frontier craftsmanship. Historians still argue whether 19th century American clockmakers ever produced reversing movements, or if this one was modified later by unknown hands. A wind gust rattles the tower's loose stones, sending a shower of dust motes illuminated by your flashlight. You brush your sleeve across your neck, unease prickling in every pore. Above, the reversed hands begin to accelerate. Tick-tock, tick-tock, accelerating until the sound blurs into a single hum. Your pulse matches the hum, and the world around you seems to ripple, making familiar buildings shimmer like mirages. You stagger back, arms outstretched to steady yourself. You blink, and the saloon's piano you heard in Section 2 materialises at the tower's base, its keys gleaming in the moonlight. The collapsed mine entrance looms beside the tower, though you know it lies blocks away. You spin, the hotel's balcony appears overhead, then vanishes as quickly. Each blink resets the scene, layering impossible reflections over reality. You swallow hard, reminding yourself that optical illusions and starlight can trick the mind, but this distortion feels too coherent to dismiss. Summoning your focus, you pull a pocket watch from your vest, a modern digital piece, its face dark. You press its button, and the tiny screen flickers the correct time, 1:13 a.m. You raise it alongside the tower clock, the contrast jarring. One moves backward, the other refuses to tick at all, blank as if drained of power. In the digital age, clocks never stray from absolute time, yet here, the analogue defies your watch, holding its own rule. Footsteps clang behind you, distant but unmistakable, boots on metal, descending tower stairs perhaps. You whirl around, light slicing the darkness toward the tower's shadowed door. The footsteps stop. Silence resumes, punctuated only by the backward ticking. You strain to hear, but the clock dominates every sound, your own breathing localized into that relentless reversal. You take a wary step forward, heart hammering with a curiosity stronger than fear. If you ascend the stairs, maybe you'll reach the belfry, or find the mechanism governing this temporal rebuke. You place your hand on the cold stone wall and begin to climb the narrow steps chiseled into the tower's interior. Each step echoes backward as though you descend, making your head whirl. Time seems to drag at your limbs, and joy flight of dizziness sweeps you. Halfway up, you pause, leaning against the rough stone. Through a crack, you glimpse the town below, now inverted. Houses stacked in illogical rows, boardwalks twisting skyward. You hear a whisper. Turn back. It could be the wind, or the tower itself murmuring. You steel your resolve and climb the final steps, emerging into the clock chamber where the reverse ratchet mechanism stands before you, its pole glowing faintly as it clicks. You reach out, touching the pole's edge, and instantly the ticking halts. The backward motion stutters, then the minute hand swivels forward to its proper place, slowly, at first, then resumes a steady, forward tick. The world below rights itself, inverted buildings slide back into place, the piano disappears. You exhale a shuddering breath, blinking away storm-tossed visions. Below, the church bell rings the correct hour, chime and clock now harmonised. You step back through the broken window, leaving the reversed clock behind as the moon's gaze shifts away, descending the tower's stairs. Each step now feels natural, forward-bound, guiding you toward a world no longer undone. On solid ground, you pause outside the tower door. The clock face above glows, its hands circling normally once more. You glance at your pocket watch. It reads 1:17 a.m. Time has slipped 4 minutes in the climb. You wonder whether the clock granted you extra time or reclaimed lost moments. Fringe seekers claim a backward clock can grant wishes in exchange for memories. Scholars still debate if such folklore originates in human longing to reset regrets or in actual timepiece anomalies. You turn away, boots crunching on gravel. The reverse clock now ticks in sync with your heartbeat. A reminder that even here, time can be both tether and illusion. As you step into the night, you carry with you the knowledge that in this ghost town, time itself bends to memory, and only those brave enough to turn its hands can glimpse the impossible. You press on along a narrow lane flanked by collapsed corrals, the moon's faint glow illuminating hoofprints pressed into the sandy floor. These tracks are deep and uneven, as if carved by heavy iron-shod hooves rather than soft desert sand. You follow them cautiously, noting each subtle drift, some leading toward the hotel's back entrance, others veering toward the abandoned smithy. Then, abruptly, the hoofprints vanish, swallowed by undisturbed dust. It feels as though the rider simply rode off the earth itself. Frontier horse tracks could last for weeks in arid climates, witnesses to cattle drives and cavalry patrols alike. By 1885, ranchers estimated that nearly half of range injuries resulted from mounted accidents. Historians still argue whether these vanished tracks reflect natural erosion or the supernatural halting of phantom riders. Here, you sense more than erosion. There's intention in the print's sudden end. You bend to inspect the last clear print, a single horseshoe with a cross-shaped nail pattern. That pattern matches no Civil War cavalry shoe nor common ranch variety. It feels unique, as though custom forged. A quirky local legend speaks of a lone rider cursed to roam the plains on a ghost horse, the steel shoes bearing his maker's mark so his victims could recognise him. Skeptics insist such tales originated from a blacksmith's branding experiment gone awry, but here, the mark remains impossibly distinct. You rise and follow the direction of the tracks pointed, toward a small cluster of cabins set apart from the main town. Each cabin is half buried in drifted sand, windows dark, doors gone. The empty frames gape like watchful eyes. In the nearest cabin's threshold, you find another horseshoe, identical to the print's imprint, but resting in pristine condition, free of rust or wear. You kneel and pick it up, its iron cold in your palm as if freshly forged. You half expect it to pulse with life. A low wind whispers through the cabins, carrying soft creaks as wooden beams settle. You slip the horseshoe into your pack and step back, heart thudding. Ahead, a narrow alley leads to a rickety wooden fence patched with planks and rope. Through gaps, you glimpse a small stable yard beyond, though no barn stands. You push through and discover a single stall, its floor covered in a thick layer of fine sand. Against the back wall, horse reins dangle from nails, tarnished brass buckles glinting faintly. You stir the sand with your fingertip and uncover a deeper hoofprint, the same cross-tack pattern, but newer, pressed into damp soil beneath the drifting dust. How could damp soil persist here? You glance around. No springs, no leaky roofs, nothing to explain fresh moisture. You tentatively press your finger into the print. The soil yields easily, then slides away, filling the heel of your glove with cold, wet grit. You pull back, startled. This yard has been watered recently, though the entire town is bone dry. A scraping sound behind you makes you whirl around. At the alley's far end, a heavy swinging door creaks slightly. You step toward it, boots barely making a sound on the soft sand. Pushing it open, you enter a narrow shed where shafts of moonlight reveal walls lined with old harnesses and bridles, dusty but intact. In the centre stands a dusty trough, half filled with murky water. The water ripples, though no breeze touches the shed's still air. You shuffle forward, the trough's water reflecting the sheen of your flashlight beam. You lean over it and catch your reflection, distorted, doubled, as if two versions of you peer back. The reflection blinks independently, raising its brows in silent question. You step back, rattled, flashlight trembling in your hand. You remind yourself that water reflections can warp in shallow troughs, but this feels alive, an echo of Section 15's backward clock, bending reality to memory's whim. Shaking off the chill, you turn to leave, but a clatter beneath the trough draws your eye. Something dark skitters away, disappearing under a pile of old straw. You approach and part the straw. A horseshoe nail, long and sharp, its point still gleaming. You pocket it beside the larger shoe, feeling the weight of both as tokens of a vanished mount. The nail's imprint matched those cross-shaped marks, tying the shoe, the print, and now this nail together in a singular mystery. Stepping back into the alley, the wind picks up, carrying distant whinnies that echo off wooden walls. You follow the sound to the main street, where you pause. No hoofprints mark the dusty road, yet the echoes persist, growing louder, closer. A silhouette appears at the street's far end, a lone rider perched on an unseen horse, brimmed hat tilted low. You squint, but the figure dissolves when you blink, leaving only the wailing whinny behind. You stand frozen, heart racing, as the whinny transforms into a soft neigh, reassuring, yet impossible in an empty town. You spin to follow, but only empty corrals and drifted fences greet you. The horse's breath seems to rustle through the broken boards. You whisper, "I see you," though you know the beast is invisible, its presence lingering in sound and spoor. You step forward, determined to track this phantom steed, leading into a new chapter of secrets, where horses leave footprints, then vanish, and their riders slip through sand as if time itself grants them passage. You follow the echoing whinny, boots stirring dust, carrying the horseshoe and nail-like keys to an impossible stable, and disappear into the night, eager to uncover the next layer of this ghostly tale. You pause before a row of half-collapsed storefronts, their entrances gaping like empty eyes. Against each doorframe, weathered planks are nailed horizontally, forming barriers meant to keep something in, or keep you out. Moonlight slits through cracks, illuminating dozens of brittle envelopes affixed with rusty nails at eye level. You crouch for a closer look, heart thudding, and pry the first envelope loose. The wax seal cracks with a reluctant snap, and you unfold the yellowed paper. I buried it beneath the floorboards. I hope the dust swallows this sin forever. Forgive me, The handwriting is frantic, each letter trembling with shame. You recall that by 1885, nearly 30% of frontier letters concerned crimes or confessions, murderous quarrels over claims, secret debts, livestock thefts. Historians still argue whether most confessions were meant to unburden guilty souls or simply to condemn unintended inheritors to burden. Here, in the silence, you feel the weight of M's hidden burden pressing against your chest. You stand and move to the next doorway. Another envelope. Another confession. They came for the child under cover of darkness. I heard her cries stop at midnight. J. A knot tightens in your stomach. Infant mortality on the frontier soared above 300 deaths per 1,000 births. Cholera and diphtheria claimed lives before parents could name them. Fringe whispers tell of grief-stricken parents hiding terminally ill children in hidden cellars to spare them suffering, but mainstream medical journals dismiss such tales as sensational rumours born from isolation and fear. Scholars still debate whether any such clandestine burials really occurred or if they remain tragic campfire stories. Your flashlight beam catches a third letter, its envelope stamped with a droplet-shaped wax seal. The gold was cursed. It called to me in dreams, and I could not resist its song. Ah, Gold fever drove thousands westward, and by 1890 prospectors' madness, obsessive digging, hallucinations, self-harm was so well documented that physicians noted symptoms akin to mercury poisoning from ore processing. Historians still argue whether these breakdowns were caused by physical toxins, sleep deprivation, or genuine psychological torment inflicted by glittering veins. You envision R tossing pan, shovel, and sanity into a mineshaft, leaving this final plea nailed to regret. Moving down the line, you unfold another envelope. I sold my soul to save mine. They pay the debt now. L. Frontier gamblers wrote of selling their souls when staking everything on a single hand. By 1878, gambling halls outnumbered churches in many mining towns. Fringe legends claim literal pacts with demons occurred in smoky back rooms, yet mainstream religious leaders denounced such talk as metaphor. Scholars still debate whether rhetorical soul sales fueled real despair or simply dramatised gamblers' ruin. Beyond that, you find dozens more. I hid the bodies beneath the floor of the dance hall. They still step in time. Our preacher drank their blood before the sermons. Forgive me. I stole her ring and threw it in the well. Cold metal calls the water home. If you read this, you're already damned. G. Your pulse races as you straighten, stacking the open envelopes at your feet. Each one is a shard of dark memory. Murder, betrayal, sacrilege, theft, crime's full spectrum confessed in trembling ink. You notice some envelopes bear smudged fingerprints. Others have letters torn out and missing, as though attempted deletions. Did someone agonize over their words before nailing them up? The act of public confession in an empty town feels like a ritual of atonement performed for ghosts. You step back, brushing loose dust from your pants. A sudden breeze rattles the planks, and the envelopes flutter like agitated wings. You catch one drifting by, the writer's final plea, "Do not follow me," half-scrawled in a panic. You recall Section 11's phantom school bell and Section 14's modern footprints. This row of confessions bridges past and present, generations confessing under moonlight, some centuries old, others fresh enough that the ink still gleams. You wonder if these letters were pinned over time, first those from the 1880s, then a later wave at sundown yesterday. The barriers have become a confession wall, a gothic gallery of human frailty. A loose nail pops free, and you wince as it clatters to the ground. It strikes a letter sealed by M, half tearing it open again. You kneel, gently smoothing the letter flat, careful not to smudge the ink. M writes of burying something unforgivable beneath the floorboards of the general store, buried evidence, stolen gold, a body. You realise you'll need to return later to excavate beneath that portal of commerce. As you stand, the wind dies, and silence returns, thick, expectant, as if the town itself awaits your next move. You gather the opened letters into your satchel, each one a testament to lives derailed by greed, desperation, or fear. You leave the sealed ones on the boards, their confessions unfinished, their authors still lurking in shadows or long gone. With each step away, you feel the confession trailing behind like a maelstrom of guilt. You pause at the end of the row and reflect. Here, nailing a letter to a plank was both condemnation and redemption. Condemnation of the sinner and redemption through acknowledgement. Historians still argue whether public confession served as genuine moral reckoning or as spectacle in a town starved of moral authorities. You exhale, the night air tasting of old paper and regret. You close your satchel, heavy with secrets, and turn back to the saloon's distant silhouette. Ahead, you know the final sections await. The eyes in shattered windows, sunrise that never comes, and the agonising loop from which no one escapes. But tonight, you carry these confessions like lanterns, guiding your path through the dark heart of this forgotten place. You slip through a narrow alley flanked by crumbling storefronts until you arrive at a 2-story clapboard building, once the town's undertaker and funeral parlour. Its windows on both floors gape like hollow eye sockets, the glass long shattered, leaving crooked frames that gaze out onto empty streets. You pause beneath the second-story window, chest tightening as you sense a presence behind the broken panes. A soft breeze stirs ragged curtains, creating shapes that flit and flicker. Was it just wind, or something more deliberate observing your every move? In the 1890s, funeral parlours in western towns often doubled as morgues, and public viewing in parlour windows allowed townsfolk to pay respects. By 1895, over 70% of frontier communities hosted open casket farewells. Historians still argue whether these viewings provided genuine communal grieving opportunities, or fed morbid curiosity that blurred respect with spectacle. Here, in the empty parlour, you feel that tension reversed. The viewers are gone, but their eyes remain. You step closer and peer into the lower window. Dust and debris obscure most of the interior, yet two dark shapes stand out, framed photographs of the deceased, faces frozen in sepia smiles. Their eyes, wide, bright, seem to track you. You swallow, reminding yourself that mannequins and photos can create eerie illusions, but your heart leaps as one photograph tilts inexplicably on its hook. You lean in, the glassless pane feels cooler than the night air whispering past. You reach a trembling hand toward the frame, and as your fingers brush the wood, a distant creak upstairs makes you jerk back. Looking up, you catch movement. A single pair of boots stepping across the upper floor's wooden planks. The pace is deliberate, measured. You can almost see the silhouette of a figure pacing behind the curtain's ragged edge. A quirky rumour holds that in some ghost towns, the deceased spirits return nightly to keep vigil in their own viewing rooms, standing watch for visitors who never come. Skeptics say the sounds arise from settling floorboards and critters scuttling above. Yet here, the pacing feels too rhythmic, too purposeful. You circle the building and find a side window, its shutter hanging loosely. Peering through, you see the parlour's interior, overturned chairs with cracked leather seats, a tarnished casket propped open, its velvet lining faded but intact. A mounted stag's head, antlers splayed, watches from the far wall, an echo of frontier taxidermy fashion. You recall that by the late 1880s, taxidermy was a popular parlour decoration, symbolising human dominion over nature's beasts. Historians still debate whether such trophies served as comforting reminders of taming the wild, or as reminders of death's inevitability. Suddenly, a soft tapping sounds from inside the parlour's front door, perhaps nudged by unseen hands. You step back, heart pounding, and a flicker of movement at the corner of your vision draws you to a back entrance. You slip around to find a narrow back window, glass cracked but shards still hanging in the frame. Pressing your face close, you peer into the embalming room. Metal tables stand empty, jars of formaldehyde and arsenic powder sitting dusty on wooden shelves. You inhale the stale chemical scent that hovers like a ghost of past procedures. A single jar top slides off its shelf with a faint clatter, as though nudged by a phantom finger. You hold your breath, eyes narrowing, expecting to see a breeze swirl the papers on the embalming ledger. The pages flutter, then settle on a ledger entry scrawled in spidery ink. Nov. 5, 1886. Adjustment of tongue for Mr. P. Woods. A macabre detail from parlour customs, embalming books often documented anatomical adjustments intended to restore lifelike features. Fringe mortuary lore claims parlour ledgers can trap echoes of the dead's final thoughts, whispered by unseen tongues. Scholars still debate whether such accounts reflect spiritual residue or mere suggestion in hushed, candle-lit rooms. Drawing back, your heart hammers as a pale face slips into view at the upper window, a woman's visage, lips pressed in a silent scream, eyes wide with horror. You gasp and step away, but the face remains, mouthing words you can't hear. Another legend warns that those who meet a corpse's gaze in a funeral parlour window risk sharing its fate, condemned to join the dead's vigil. Skeptics dismiss the warning as a centuries-old superstition to keep curious children from peering through drawing room windows. Yet you feel the legend's pull in the tremor running down your spine. You stand in the dirt, boots sinking slightly, and shine your light back at the parlour. The upstairs window is empty once more. Curtain still. The jars, the photographs, the casket, they lie inert, awaiting your next move. But in the hush, you sense those eyes returning. Patient, unmoving, watching for you to step deeper into their realm. Tentatively, you approach the front door, bracing yourself for splinters beneath your fingers. As you reach out, a distant train whistle blows, a lone tremor of life echoing across deserted tracks. For a heartbeat, hope flares that you're not entirely alone, that civilization still reaches these ruins. Then the whistle fades, swallowed by the night, and you realise the parlour's eyes remain. Stepping back, you decide against entry. You hold your breath in reverent fear, acknowledging that some places must remain undisturbed, that watching eyes behind broken panes bear witness to secrets too heavy for daylight. You turn and slip away, each step echoing on the gravelled lane, carrying the memory of silent watchmen and their unblinking gaze into the town's next shadowed corner. You trudge along the deserted street, dawn's promise, long promise, but never delivered. The horizon, once softening from inky black to a bruised purple, stubbornly holds its darkness. You pause and glance eastward. No pale glow, no hint of sun. Even the eastern sky seems to recoil, folding its light inward, as though afraid to break this town's eternal night. A chill settles over you, deeper than the desert's typical bite, as you realise tonight refuses to end. In the 19th century, frontier towns depended on sunrise to mark each new day's labours: mining, ranching, trading. By 1887, pocket watches and station clocks synchronised communities to sunrise and sunset. Historians still argue whether frontier life's rigidity around daylight hours forged resilient settlers or amplified their isolation. Here, as darkness clings infinitely, you feel the old rhythms collapse. You stop before a low stone wall, the cemetery's boundary, where the parlour's watchful windows once stared. Now, the graves beyond are swallowed in midnight's grasp, their stones melded into shadow. You lean over the wall, one hand on cool rock, and call softly. Sunrise? Your voice curls into the void, unanswered. In most places, morning birds would answer with tentative songs. Here, not a single note ripples the silent air. A soft rustle behind you draws your attention to the main street's far end. There, in the lamplight that never fully goes out, the livery's hitching post stands bathed in a glow that feels neither candle nor moon. You approach warily and see horseshoes nailed to the post, hundreds of them, all layered. Each bears the cross-shaped mark you recognised in Section 16, the Ghost Rider's sign. But here, they form a testament. Horses that arrived at midnight but found no dawn, tethered to this ageless night. By 1890, horse breeding records show most frontier ranchers reused horses until they died of age or injury. Horseshoes were precious investments. Historians still argue whether abandoned horses were freed at town's collapse or left to wander into the wild. Here, the nails suggest tethering, a refusal to let even beasts escape this unending darkness. You step back, unsettled, and continue to the town's edge where the first building, the derelict general store, still stands. Its front window reflects your shape, but behind you, nothing stirs. You recall Section 9's well with its gurgling depths, now silent. A lone tumbleweed drifts by, but its path loops back as if drawn by an unseen current, reminding you that even wind conforms to this place's strange rules. You skirt the store's corner and find yourself at the post office, its door sealed with aged planks. Beneath the planks, you see a narrow crack through which pale light, though never sunrise, seeps. You press your eye to it, half expecting to glimpse daybreak. Instead, you see only a blank world, walls lined with empty boxes, each numbered but unopened. A single pigeon egg lies on the floor, but it never hatches. In frontier post offices, pigeons once carried messages across canyons. Here, even messengers sleep in unhatched stasis. You step away and cross Main Street to the town hall, its second-floor windows barred. The clock tower you righted in Section 15 stands silent now, the hands frozen at 11:59, and they never move. You pat the wooden door's cold surface and push. It swings open without resistance, revealing empty council chambers. The long bench where town elders once sat is gone, but on the wall you find a painted mural, a sunrise over mountains. The paint is peeling, but the colours, crimson, gold, lavender, still burn with hope. Yet outside the sky denies their promise. In the centre of the chamber lies a single sheet of parchment on a rotting podium, a proclamation sealed but unclaimed. You break the seal, that familiar crack echoing like a gunshot, and read its faded lines. By order of the Council of Shadows, night shall reign until all debts are paid, and each soul here finds its dawn within this darkness. The Council of Shadows, an unseen governing body, promised sunrise to those who honoured frontier obligations. Debts settled, wrongs made right, promises fulfilled. Historians still argue whether such councils existed in lawless settlements, or if they were metaphorical assemblies of claim holders enforcing codes by gunpoint. Here, the proclamation seems literal. The town waits for debts to be paid before light can return. Your eyes sting as you imagine the townsfolk, trapped in unbroken night, bound by unfulfilled pledges. From Section 6's miners to Section 14's explorers, each visitor who took and never gave back left the town's ledger unbalanced. You whisper the ledger's unspoken line, I owe. For each unknown debt unconfessed, sunrise remains unpaid. You descend the steps and return to the street. The silence feels charged, waiting for someone, anyone, to settle old scores. Your pulse thunders. Will you pay these debts? Will you confess or atone for sins you did not commit? Even as a visitor, your presence unsettles the balance. You feel the weight of every letter in Section 17's confessions, every footprint in Section 13 echoing here. The town demands reconciliation. You take a deep breath and reach into your pocket, retrieving the letters and photographs you collected. Maybe, if you offer them, each confession, each relic, back to the town, you can tip the balance. You lay them on the cracked flagstone where the proclamation rested, forming a makeshift altar. You whisper each name aloud. M, J, R, L, Thomas McCall, Eliza Grant, W, C. Their names hang in the air, prayers in the void. As you finish, the proclamation's seal shivers and cracks once more. You press your ear to the door's wood and hear the faintest stir, like a breeze negotiating with a door. A soft glow edges the windows, pale, hesitant, like a candle's first flame. You blink, and the sky shows a sliver of pink just above the distant ridge, dawn's timid first light. Your breath catches. For months, perhaps years, this town never saw sunrise. Now, in this moment of collective atonement, settling debts through names and confessions, dawn creeps over the horizon, brushing the buildings with gold. You step outside as the world exhales, the long night finally ending. The sunrise, long denied, paints the streets, the cemetery, and the empty storefronts in warm hues. You feel tears of relief and awe prick your eyes, knowing that for this town, tomorrow truly comes. You linger in the soft glow of dawn, watching the sun's rays peel back layers of shadow, revealing every weathered board and dusty window in crisp light. The town exhales, as if shedding its centuries-long stupor, and you feel the gentle warmth seep through your coat. The air tastes sweet, sage and pine mingled with the faint tang of spent gunpowder now washed clean. You cradle the last horseshoe and the pile of letters in one hand, wondering what final act of atonement remains. As you walk the street, you notice the hoof prints from Section 16 re-emerge in the dampening sand, leading back toward the hotel. Curious, you follow them until they fade at the front porch. There, you place the pristine horseshoe on the railing, an offering to the phantom rider whose boots left these prints. The sun strikes the iron, sending a spark of brilliance that banishes any lingering night's gloom. You whisper, "Ride on," and watch as the hoofprints' edges blur in the morning light. You continue to the hotel's shattered mirror behind the bar, letters from Section 17 in hand. You carefully tuck each confession into the splintered frame, as though returning their secrets to the town itself. One by one, the stories slip back into the wood. I buried it beneath the floorboards. They came for the child. The gold was cursed, and the final vow. If you read this, you're already damned. As the sun's rays enter the saloon, the mirror's shards catch each letter's edge, reflecting their words into scattered prisms of light. You sense a shift, a release, as though these confessions have been forgiven or at least acknowledged. Stepping outside, you head to the well from Section 9. You lower the bucket once more, this time tied to your satchel strap. You fetch water that glitters with dawn's fire instead of the old gurgle of secrets. You pour a small trickle at the cemetery's edge, sprinkling it over the unmarked graves and the circle of outcasts' mounds. The water's sparkle fades into the soil, and a breeze rustles through the headstones like a whispered thank you. You nod, feeling the circle complete. A final stop at the clock tower sees the hands now ticking forward. The proclamation from Section 19 removed and carried by you. You nail it to the post office's door, an announcement to all who remain or return: debts have been acknowledged, and the sunrise is here. The paper flutters in the gentle morning wind, its seals broken but its words reclaimed by living hands. Now that the town breathes anew, you trace your steps back through the main thoroughfare. Each building greets you with warmth. The church's stained glass catches first light in ruby and emerald hues. The schoolhouse bells ring faintly on a breeze. The forge's anvil gleams silver where sparks once flew. Even the jail's barred windows glow, no longer menacing shadows but reminders of closure and freedom. You stand at the town's dusty edge, boots sinking slightly in the morning's softened sand. Behind you, the frontier's ghosts settle into peace, their stories honoured in light rather than buried in darkness. Ahead, open land beckons, the trail awaiting your next adventure under the sun's unbroken shine. You breathe deeply, allowing the day's soft luminescence to fill every corner of your mind. The horizon's gentle fire fades into warmth that cradles your spirit, each beam wrapping you in reassurance. Feel the cool sand beneath your boots give way to the morning's tender embrace, and let your heart beat steady in rhythm with the world restored to light. Imagine the town's sigh of relief as windows shimmer with renewed promise, its roof lines crowned in golden rays. The whistle of distant rails carries hope rather than hollow echoes. Every plank and shutter, once burdened by ghosts and secrets, now shines with the simple grace of a fresh beginning. As your senses settle, let the memories of midnight's mysteries drift away like morning mist. The lingering chill of unanswered knocks, the backward ticking of impossible clocks, the phantom hoofbeats, all fade into yesterday's shadows. What remains is the warmth of acknowledgement, the hush of secrets redeemed, and the soft chorus of life reclaiming its natural cadence. Feel gratitude for every hidden confession returned to light, every tethered spirit released by your careful atonement. The town's long-held debts lie paid, and in the absence of shadows, you discover peace not just for these silent streets, but within your own heart. Now, let the gentle fan of morning breeze brush your skin, each whisper a lullaby of renewal. Close your eyes and breathe the sunrise's soft exhale, knowing that darkness may once have held sway, but light endures, steady, unwavering, and forgiving. Here, in the hush between night and day, every story finds its dawn at last.